Okay, hi, thank you so much for being here, Helgard. My name is Elizabeth Benninger. I'm part-time faculty here at the Gallatin School of Individualized Study at NYU, and I'm here with Helgard Haug.
That's me. I'm from the company Rimini Protokoll, based in Berlin. Writer, author, director, have many hats.
Yes, and she is donning two of them at least here this week at Skirball, where her production, All Right, Good Night, of which she is both writer, creator, and director, will be having its North American premiere just a few days later this week. So I'm super excited to talk about the show. I haven't seen it yet. I've only seen sort of like the preview snippet that was on Rimini Protokoll's site. So a lot of my questions are going to be more conceptual, but I'm also interested in the form that you chose to use for the piece. But to start out, I thought we could talk maybe a bit about like the creative origins of the piece, because it's such an interesting sort of interweaving that you're doing between the kind of, story of the missing Malaysia flight, MH370, which was such like a global media sensation when it happened in 2014, with your own very personal experience of sort of being with your father as he faded into dementia. So I'm just wondering how the idea to even bring these two sorts of strands together came to you.
Maybe different to other projects, that wasn't the concept. Like often like the approach is very conceptual, in fact, like to sit and to make concepts as well in teams to figure out what's our new theme, but as well like what's the structure of the theater play. So it's not always like frontal, like not on a stage. It might be like an installation. It could be a tour through the city. So it has many different forms, and the conceptual idea is often very, very strong in the beginning. So here it's really different, though it sounds so conceptual. What I knew was that it will be a play that has music in it, that music has a strong part. So it's a composer, Barbara Morgenstern, that I work with in other projects as well, and we were clear on collaborating for this project. And we had a topic or a theme, which was disappearance. That was about it. So that was the starting point, to say it's something that is actually not... it's not something that you can easily perform, because theater is so much about appearance, and it's so much about I'm here, I'm on stage, it's here and now. And so to contradict this somehow, to say we want to create something where it's never really clear who's actually present and who's maybe just through media presented, like how many people are there actually. There was the idea to have parts in really darkness on stage. So that was all like things that we wanted to explore. And like with all our projects, like we really go into deep research at first. So it is a kind of documentary theater where we try to learn from people. So we have a topic, and then we approach people to tell us maybe more than reading books, or it's really like maybe journalistic research, going out, meeting people, talking to people, getting inspirations, trying to find out how will we tell this story, or who will be actually on stage is another big question, of course, in my theater practice, as it's not actresses and actors. So, and to quickly like tell what was a long time of trying out and finding out, was that at a certain point I realized that there is a similar maybe feeling, or maybe a similar situation somehow in losing a person like that. Might be in a plane, and where it's not clear what happened to the plane, or in a war where people disappear. Similar to what happens when you lose somebody, or when somebody's losing his or her mind and memory, and it's again in communication not clear where this person is actually, where is he or she, and I'm talking about my father now in this case, like where is that person, like how can I reach, and how is he, how what is still there? How can I connect somehow? So that was a bit like the long journey to finally deciding maybe we can tell two stories at once in alternating between the Malaysian flight story, which, as you mentioned, is a well-known global huge media, hugely covered by media, and a very silent personal loss.
Yeah, and that, what you sort of just said about memory strikes me sort of as being an interesting point of conversation with your documentary practice, because memory makes up so much of sort of self-identity, self-image, right? Both perhaps of a person undergoing dementia and also their loved ones, right? Like it's something that really impacts everyone's sense of self. But I'm curious, how you sort of see memory, which is this intangible and, sort of ineffable almost quality or capacity that we all have, in conversation with like a documentary practice that is really looking for kind of like the tangible, whether that's in conversation with other people or like in finding like a physical document or a photograph or plane debris or something like that.
So because normally we do invite people to present their own story on stage, so it is of course all about links to memories and interpretation of that. Sometimes we invite people that have memories of the same, very different memories, but of the same event, for example, to say it's all about different perspectives as well and contradicting memories maybe even, but the proof is that a person on stage represents him or herself. So that's my story, and I come on stage, and of course it's a long process in our projects to write this text and to massage this all into a play, but still the person is representing the memory, and the memory makes the person and the personality. And here, it's about dementia where memory fools you. It's people tell things they never experience or say things as facts that are really untrue, and it's part of a game that the game is cynical part of the illness actually, that it's not reliable anymore. Nothing is reliable. And that's what I'm trying to tell in the play, because the same on the story with the flight, like all the announcement that I had made, all what people tried to find out, whatever they received as fact or information was not reliable. They got no answer. And so it is really about this very thin ice that suddenly you're standing on, where it's not, where there are no facts, no truth, no reliable information.
And that's really interesting, and that was something I was curious about, in trying to think through the different kind of resonances of the two threads of the piece. Because, thinking about the missing flight story, like I remember when that was all over the news, right, and it really took over headlines for a long time, and even as the search went on, whenever there would be a new search, there would be a new sort of, breaking news headline. And I think it's interesting to think about how a kind of like exceptional loss like that didn't, most of the people who are fascinated by it are not actually immediately touched, still can kind of grab a global media attention, perhaps for sensational reasons as well, right? But even just thinking about like how events like that impact a kind of like, I don't know if we want to think about like a collective memory or a kind of like, to use like a Raymond Williams term, like a structure of feeling of the present, because what you're saying about sort of this unreliability of information and nobody knowing even if the official statements being put out are based in fact at all, I think links up to a lot of preoccupations that we all have right now, and a sort of the growth of generative AI and post-truth and all of that.
Yeah, it touches all this, though it's like it happened 2014, so it was a different time somehow. But I think, yes, you have to trust system in order to put yourself on a flight. Like,
right.
I mean, you're in a plane
yeah.
and you're depending on
Yeah.
technology, you're depending on human knowledge and power and capacity, and we do this. Like, though it's so crazy that it works most of the time, and most of the time nothing happens and it works out well and you arrive and so on, everything is fine. But I think that was the first part that was really interesting to me, that something in this system that seems to be so controlled and monitored and surveyed through surveillance, that it can happen that there is Boeing disappearing. So that's fact number one, where I was really like, what? And then the next really interesting thing is that it never got, like, we never got the truth story about it. Like, we still don't know what has happened. And I think that's like on this scale, like of a Boeing and so many people involved and so like densely connected in this travel system. That was really interesting to me. And how do you look at it in media? Like, is it a story about the feelings of the people that are waiting for the people that were on the flight, or is it the ambition to find out, or is it to come up with a theory that, and there are so many characters in this play,
right?
And some of them I do quote. Like, I was in conversation as well with two guys that lost their family. Like, one lost his wife and 3 kids, and the other lost his wife actually on the flight. So I was as well in conversation with them to find out how do you survive that? Like, how do you cope with it? What's your strategy? How do you feel? What happened actually, and how can you survive not knowing? So, and parts of this as well is in the text itself, in the theater play.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that you had been in touch with some of the victims' families. That's really interesting. Did you, like, in sort of what they explained to you in terms of like how they've been trying to come to terms with this, still very uncertain fate of their loved ones, did you feel like there were direct sort of resonances there with what you were experiencing with your father? Was that sort of one, is that a thread that sort of comes up in the piece?
I think they understood, like, that's what I, of course, told them, like, why am I trying to get in touch with them? What is my, like, idea? Why do I want to talk to them? And I always mentioned it is about, like, a theater production where these two stories would actually be combined. And I think their reason to answer and to allow me to speak to them for a couple of hours, like in a couple of conversations, the reason was that it was not merely about themselves and their emotions, because I think that many of the victims are really traumatized as well by media and all kinds of journalists and so on coming and consuming their feelings. Like, so it's all about this drama, and it's all about the tragedy, and they put the tragedy on the front paper or in their story, and it's not so much about reflecting how do you actually, how do you manage to live with this. So I had the feeling we didn't really talk a lot about the other story, like about dementia, but I think it opened the door that it's not only, taking their story
about about this,
And I mean, it's very silent now. So there was, at the beginning, there were many, many people in the media, and I think most of them finally turned their back to media and said, I don't want to talk to them anymore. And some of them wrote their own books or tried to find a way to communicate what they feel and experience. But it's somehow silent, and like what is taking over is more like technical voices, like people that try to technically interpret what might have happened, and theories and conspiracies all about this. So that's what you hear.
Right, yeah, still filling that void. Yeah, and I mean, I guess, something I'm also curious about, sort of going back to your original point that this is fundamentally a work about disappearance, right? And I was really struck that you said sort of like the first thing you knew that it was going to involve music, somehow, because of course, like the in any kind of like artistic work, how to represent loss or absence or disappearance is a perennial issue, right? And like certainly you can think about it's not all about representation. And I'm curious about that too, like what is it about theater as an experience that sort of makes it a privileged medium for thinking through or working through maybe these issues. But maybe first you could talk a little bit more about how you sort of knew that music was going to be such a central part, and talk about your collaboration with Barbara Morgenstern.
Probably because what music is doing is opening emotions, right? So, and we knew the disappearance is an emotional topic, but maybe it's difficult to describe or to talk or to find the right words, and maybe it's even about disappearing while doing this. That was, I don't know, it was just clear.
Okay.
And then and it was also clear that we wanted live musicians, and we want classical instruments, like not so much electronic music that we used in other productions more intensively, but really instruments. And I always like musicians watching to play. Like I like to observe, like how can they actually create sound, and how do they communicate with one another? How do they agree on a rhythm, and what's their codes and their text? That was something we just wanted to explore with this production. And we didn't talk about like on stage, like we have the 5 musicians, and it's 8 years. The structures is 8 years, so it's a prologue and 8 years and an epilogue, the music more and more takes over actually. So in the beginning, we project the text, so the stories are projected on a semi-transparent gauze that is in the portal. And through it you watch the musicians in different settings. And in the beginning it's like always the music stops at a certain point, and then there's some sound creation still, but the musicians stop playing and the text keeps on. Like it's more text than actually can be covered by the music. But after the half of the play, it's the opposite development, that there are less and less words, and music gets more and more time, and is more stronger. And so that was when we knew that we are talking about dementia as well, and about the confusion, like the mental loss as well. It was clear that music is still a way to communicate for people that even lost their memories, that can't remember. But maybe like in my father's case, it was the same. Like he already didn't know anymore who I am as his daughter, but he could sing songs. He memorized all the lyrics. He could remember everything perfectly well. Was like there with the music. And I think music opens a lot of memories, but as well, of course, like for the audience, it maybe allows them as well to lay back a little bit on this emotion, and to fly on that.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that text was such a sort of like significant feature of the performance too, because I was already thinking this as a very sort of like intermedial work of theater with the music and with visuals as well. So the text and that sort of reliance on language, maybe in the absence of kind of like more physical representations of the story is really interesting. But I'm wondering, because I know, since you mentioned the text and sort of the preponderance of text, I know you published a novel by the same name just a couple years ago, 2023. So I'm wondering if, was that sort of like an adaptation? Were these co-created works? And I'm, to me, when I think about novel and theater, those are very different kind of like aesthetic objects that presume different kinds of aesthetic experiences to their audiences. So I'm just curious how you see these two in conversation.
I mean, first of all, I think the theater text is not so much like a drama because it doesn't have any roles. Like it's actually like a novel that we read together. So I always define it as a collective reading because people are actually reading. Like they sit in their seat and then the first sentence begins to be projected, and this keeps on for 2.5 hours. So they read the text together, and it's really fascinating how people tune into this. And the whole idea was actually that you read it with your own voice. I wanted people to have their own voice in their head and to connect it to their own stories and situations. So it's not like roles. A drama normally has A, B, and then he speaks, she speaks, and so on, and it's all clear that there's a lot of between the words that's been acting and played. But here it is it's a protocol maybe as well of two things that happen alongside of each other. It's very often very really short sentences try to describe something very precisely that is happening. And so I knew the text could as well work as a text between in a book form. And I liked the idea to not only present it on stage, but to see is it possible. So the novel is like an adaptation, so it's more text, it's different text and so on, but the basic structure is the same. I was interested in, I don't know, I think many of my works try to explore new situations. I do radio play, but exhibitions as well, and so on, site-specific work, but as well stage production. I like to explore different forms. And with the book, I have the feeling, I don't know, I like the idea that it's at home, maybe at the moment. Somebody is reading this whereas theater, I'm always with the production, of course. I'm always in the auditorium. I like to figure out and I like to explore and to sense how is the audience actually involving. So that's very interesting and I really love it. But on the other hand, it was just nice to see what else can you do with this text.
What else? And that's interesting that you said that it's nice that an idea that it could just be one person at home reading, right? Because that was something I was curious about, especially as you sort of referred to the theatrical experience as a kind of protocol, right? Which is obviously also built into the Rimini Protokoll name, right?
Yeah.
To me, at least, when I was thinking of that, I was okay, so this is something where the audience is also part of the protocol, and it really becomes this sort of collective experience where perhaps maybe differentiation between who's on the stage and who in the audience doesn't matter as much. So, I'm just curious, in terms of thinking about loss and disappearance, do you think that a collective sort of setting like that is a privileged sort of platform to work through questions around loss and around watching loved ones decline, or around sort of mysteries that can't be solved? Or do you really think it's just dependent and there's also a place for the person at home with the book?
It's just very different. In theater, we everything is controlled by our decisions, right? The timing, the lighting, the setting, the music. It's a whole dramaturgy, of course, that is applied, and I really love it, and I think it's great, like, because it's one of the few places where we all focus on one thing. I mean, nobody's
Right.
checking. Oh, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Follow up on that in a moment.
Yeah. But okay, most of the
Yeah.
people,
Mhm.
disconnect from their devices and focus on something, and that collectively, and it's magic to me, and it's
Yeah.
really important that we have those places where it's not about my own decision and my view and my
Mhm.
rhythm, but I sort of, I don't know, I always feel like it's one body in the end. So of course they might dislike each other and they might disagree and everything. I'm not about, I don't want to make them one, but the feeling is you are on a journey together, and you agreed on this, and you sit down, and yeah, that's where you're traveling, and it's this collective experience that I'm really interested in, and more, because life gets more and more. It's more and more my own little, my own, and I'm not paying attention. I'm not into one thing, but I'm separate from the others somehow. So that, first of all, I really think it's the right place to be, and to invite people to, and to explore on all different levels. But on the other hand, like, it is, of course, I mean, it took us really, it's a lot of effort to set this up here. So we had to travel. It's very expensive. It's very exclusive. It's only a couple of people that could do it at this time that we sort of scheduled for this place. So it leaves many people out. And I think, like theater, it could have many forms to just be more inviting to something. So there's a radio production as well, which has a completely other approach, because suddenly I need to work with voices, and it's much shorter, but I like to work on different forms, just to make more invitations.
Okay, that's great. That's actually, I wanted to ask about this because I had just been reading like a book a few weeks ago that came out maybe last year, looking at kind of post-World War II experimental theater in the United States, and making some kind of argument that, like, it necessarily had to sort of deal with the fact that cinema became the, most popular kind of hegemonic form of mass culture, right? And so, like, theater did not have to embrace that, but had to respond in some way. And I was wondering, whether this is formally speaking or otherwise, if you sort of see a similar moment now where it's like theater has to respond to the fact that this is, kind of peak social media era. Everyone is on their phones. I don't know what the hegemonic mass culture form would be now, maybe TikTok or something, but, it strikes me that there's another sort of shift where...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we make apps as well, for example. So I think so as an artist, yes, you have to respond, and it's. But I also think you have to use what is possible on technology as well, and media, but to transform it somehow. To use it but transform, to make. And I'm more interested in collective experience than an individualized. Though we made projects where, especially like contradicting perspectives on the same is like the topic, which is interesting and maybe a response to. So playing with this, transferring it somehow. But I think it's really a problem, like where we are at the moment, that we are not referring to the same events anymore. Like we get them so... or we receive and digest them in such individualized and different ways that it's difficult to feel it's the same, or to feel we are part of something common. And I think theater could be more maybe proud of what it can offer.
Right.
So instead of saying it's old-fashioned, or is it that is theater that with the red seats and where everybody falls asleep? No, it's not. It's really, I think it's a place where you can experience society, and hopefully if the audience is diverse, and that's of course the most important, that it reaches out to many different and diverse persons, and then it's great, then it's needed.
Yeah, well, and I know that like in your work with Rimini Protokoll, certainly not everything that the group has done has been like on a theater stage, right? It's really broken out into other spaces, which taps in both to kind of maybe like street theater traditions of like mid-century and moving forward. I didn't know about the turn to apps, and I don't know if you could maybe say a little bit more about that and how you all have been transforming technology for your theater, maybe in any past productions or anything you have coming up.
Yeah, often like when we talked about what is actually the entrance or a starting point of a work, sometimes it's really technology as well, to say there is, and it's communication technology. For example, when like we started to use video conferences, like not in COVID, but long before, called Skype.
Yes, I remember Skype, yes.
So there, like, I was really, it was crazy. Like, I suddenly understood, okay, you can actually talk to a person on the other side of the planet, on another continent. You can even see that person. It's not like enormously expensive, but it is like, and it's being created for business, right? And for, but you can take this and connect people very, very easily, because it is programs that have been established. So for example, we work with people in call centers, like there was an Indian call center in Kolkata, and we invited audience that one-to-one would speak with one person in the call center, and that person would guide the theater person through the city, through the streets of their city, without being there, like a remote guidance, but where you had to rely on the voice of somebody in India with a strange Indian accent that would actually normally just sell things to you. But here it became a person that you were getting to know, because you could ask suddenly personal questions, and that person would tell you something about their reality, which is normally not on stage but hidden. So that's an example. Or of course everything like with media, like video work, and whatever we find which is like accessible in cheaper versions, already consumer goods, like we like to include, because it's things that we are surrounded by, and why not putting them into a theater production. And the app actually was a reaction on COVID, the times where we couldn't go on stages, where we couldn't meet collectively, where we had to distance, where we felt, okay, this is something like the cell phone could be something that we work for, which is a kind of stage for that time where we can invite people to explore their city, and so that was the app, the walk. Walks.
And that's really interesting, because it opens up sort of a different way of thinking about like what is the theater public or the theater collective, and like without the necessity of maybe having to have them in a physical space, what you can do with that. It's nice to hear that, to quote a band from the early 2000s, right? Get off the internet, I'll meet you in the street. But it's like, it's nice again to think about transformations of technology like this, where it's like actually the internet can sort of create those, not the same sorts of connections, but different kinds of connections. And maybe if I have time for one more question, great, because this, since you do sort of documentary theater, documentary art in general, and you just sort of said like something about like how do we all sort of construct or tap into collective reality. I don't know if that's something, I mean, this is maybe a big, broad question to end on, but I'm curious in what sort of role you see any kind of art having, and maybe particularly theater, very broadly defined, in creating reality. Because I think often people sort of want to say, like, okay, there's reality and then, like, artwork and concerns of the aesthetic are sort of off to the side, and maybe they can represent reality, but can they actually create it?
But yeah, like, I mean, that's maybe how I started to make theater, that I had the feeling the reality is so interesting, like, that I actually want to work on the reality, and I'm not interested in, like, drama texts that refer to, or where it's about skills and where it's about the acting itself, where it's about, like, trying as if, like, or pretending as if, where this effort was not interesting to me. Like, to me it was interesting to say, it's all here. It's like, it's your story, it's like looking outside in this amazing city, millions of interesting stories. And it's maybe as well, like, acknowledge them somehow, and seeing that there's so many in each life. There is a story that you could turn into something that stands for many stories. And documentary was, for me, just much more interesting, instead of referring to texts that have been written in other times or other circumstances, to say, I want to actually create something out of the circumstances that we are in reflection to what we experience, and as well to make maybe not such a big distance between those on stage and those in the auditorium, because I think by watching documentary pieces you understand that you have an important story too, that you could be on stage maybe too. Maybe you don't feel it, and I think if you watch, so we always define, like, our performers as experts, because it's about this expertise that I come on stage with, and it's not about the skills, it's not about acting skills or trained bodies, and where I'm maybe fascinated by, but maybe as well distracted by this, that it is so perfect.
Right.
But it's the imperfect that makes it so maybe accessible as well, and where it's really about, okay, yes, it could be my story or somebody I know as well. It's not such a, I wanted to, like, it's always about, we talk about this fourth wall, but in theater, like, that is so important to tear it down, but as well, I think, like, it's about narrowing this gap, like, to really come close, and be visible in all levels somehow.
Yeah, no, and that's really interesting. I just actually taught a text, teaching a class on journalism this semester, where, Tom Wolfe, a 20th century American journalist, known for sort of stylistic innovation, let's say, but was very hung up on sort of, like, how do you represent reality, right? And throwing kind of the literary establishment under the bus for having abandoned realism, which, I'd also see you sort of saying, like, we don't need realism when we have the real, but that was also kind of his point, where he was like, journalism is already so fascinating because everyone knows that it actually happened. Like, this is a real person that we're talking about, or a real event. So that's very interesting to see that then transmuted into the medium of theater. Yeah. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Great. Is that a good stopping point? What do we think? Is there anything else you want to say, Helgard? Okay.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you
nice
so much.
Conversation.
This is fascinating. Yeah. I'm really excited to see the performance. Yeah.